right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about making energy, ATP. So living things need energy to do the various things that living things need to do, like reproduce, to move, uh, and things like that. So organisms are endergonic systems. They need energy. You have to input energy to keep them organized. For synthesis, for making molecules, for building biomolecules, for reproduction, for movement, active transport of materials, temperature regulation, and so on. So where do we get the energy from? Well, we couple reactions. We talked about this before. You take an exergonic reaction and use the energy from that to fuel the endergonic reactions. So we break something down, release energy, and use that energy to build something new. So the economy, the energy economy of the body is ATP. To produce ATP, you need to eat high energy organic molecules. Foods like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Break them down through catabolism. Capture the energy in a form that the cells can use. And that form, that energy currency that cells can use is ATP. So this is, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and here's some description of it. It's a modified nucleotide. It's got a nucleic acid, a 5-carbon sugar ribose, and 3 phosphates. And this is how it's produced. So adding phosphates to a molecule is endergonic. These last 2 phosphates you can see have high energy bonds, and that's so typically to do work, a cell is going to take ATP, convert it to ADP, break one of those high energy bonds, and use that energy to do work. So each negative phosphate is more difficult to add because you're trying to add a negative thing onto a negative thing. So there's a lot of stored energy in those bonds. The most stored energy is in the 3rd phosphate, so that's the one that's the hardest to keep to bond, but it also has the most energy when it's broken. So that 3rd phosphate, because it's kind of spring-loaded, it's easy to break off. So to transfer energy, to get usable energy to do work, a cell converts ATP into ADP. Energy is released. Delta G is negative 7.3 kilocalories per mole. It fuels other reactions. It can be used for phosphorylation, for adding phosphate to another molecule to add energy to that molecule. So enzymes that phosphorylate are called kinases, and there's a lot of those in the living things. So building polymers from monomers, you need to destabilize the monomers, phosphorylate them. You can kind of see what's going on here in the pictures here. And we've simplified this quite a bit, but another example of phosphorylation is cellular respiration, which we're going to be talking about in the next chapter. Breaking down glucose to make ATP. We're adding phosphate to ADP, and there are a bunch of kinase enzymes involved in that. So we can't store ATP for long periods of time because it's not stable. It's a good energy donor, but not a good energy storer. It's too reactive. It transfers phosphates too easy. It's only for short term. Carbohydrates and fats are how we store energy for longer periods of time. So there's this cycle. Energy from catabolism we take ADP, add phosphate to make ATP. Then to do work, we take ATP, break it down into ADP and phosphate. So cells spend a lot of time making ATP. So there's an enzyme in the membranes of like mitochondria and chloroplast called ATP synthase, and we know it's an enzyme because it ends in ASE, and it tells us that that enzyme controls a reaction where ATP is synthesized by the name. So basically, hydrogen ions can pass through that and cause the molecule to spin. So the hydrogens move down that concentration gradient, kind of like a water wheel, and that spinning is what creates the energy to convert ADP into ATP. So that proton pump is formed through another mechanism, and we'll talk about that when we talk about cell respiration and we talk about photosynthesis.